and I think we'll see even more joining, but I'd like to welcome you all to this session, the CoreNet New York City chapter plugged in event. I'm Kelly Douglas with Holoform, and I'd like to thank in particular Liz Archer for her consistent contributions to our content. Thank you, Liz, keep it coming. And also let anyone on the call, please, if you have ideas, things you'd like us to discuss for future content, either for coffee chats, for upcoming happy hours or more plugged in events, please reach out to anyone on the CoreNet call and we'll get in touch with you. But please, for this our purposes today, mute your cameras and your microphones so that we can let the panel get started. And Anthony will introduce. Thank you very much again for joining.
Thank you very much. First, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony Colciaghi, Managing Principal with FCA. I'll be moderating our panel discussion today, which centers around the new EisnerAmper headquarters located in Midtown along the 3rd Avenue corridor, just steps from Grand Central. The facility includes 125,000 rentable square feet of workplace, including a 3,200 square foot exterior terrace and a street level private entrance lobby. A project which kicked off in 2018 pre-COVID. However, the majority of the construction ended up being during the pandemic, which our panel will discuss today. Joining me today is the tenant, EisnerAmper, as well as our prime design and delivery partners, BVA, the owner's representative, JT Magen, the construction manager, and my firm, FCA, the architect for which I was principal in charge. With me today is Rob Levine. Rob is a partner and chief operating officer of EisnerAmper. He oversees firm operations, including IT, finance, workplace strategies, facilities, change management activities for over 2,000 employees. Rob's career spans over 30 years in the industry, the majority with EisnerAmper. Also joining us is Lauren Antonelli, a senior associate and project manager at VVA. Lauren has over 35 years of experience in design, construction, and project management. Her broad depth of knowledge covers the legal, financial, professional services, and media and entertainment sectors. Lauren has also served as the PM for prior projects with EisnerAmper. Next, we have Jay Rimatzki. Jay is a project executive with JT Magen and Company. Jay leverages his architectural background and education, along with over 25 years of experience in the New York City construction market, where he drives successful outcomes for many of the city's most recognizable clients. As project executive, Jay's role is multifaceted, overseeing his team's day-to-day operations and his clients' goals. And last but not least, my partner and design principal of FCA's New York City office, Mark Harbeck, who has an impressive portfolio that ranges from 1,000 square foot design lab for Macy's to 350,000 square foot headquarters for AmeriHealth. Mark brings a vibrant depth of perspective, as well as a social and environmental sensibility to all his work. Mark was named Contract Magazine's Designer of the Year in 2006. His boundless curiosity is what pushes him to create uniquely individual design solutions for his clients. Before we begin, I'd like to share a couple of images of the recently completed project. Mark, go ahead, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Tony. Liz, can you share? While we're starting, the project was developed around 4 pillars established early on by our client. Those pillars being flexibility, collaboration, wellness, taking care of the people, and sustainability, taking care of the planet. And I'll let Rob talk about this a little bit later on in detail. Through these filters, we designed and built a transformational work environment, moving Eisner from a traditional static and hierarchical environment into a 100% unassigned and mobile work environment. Choice was a driver. Used to establish the day in the life of the employee and the visitor. Work from anywhere was our goal. Through the use of a robust mobile reservations app, employees reserve a workplace for the day or the week, and then have the ability to move amongst literally hundreds of other non-reservable seats in lounges, huddle rooms, phone booths, study pods, conference rooms, etc. In this image of the main employee and visitors lobby or arrival lobby, located on the main amenity floor, the messaging in the lobby tells the story of EisnerAmper's global presence. The ethereal space is meant to focus one's attention on this story, broadcast in a constantly updating loop on a digital media wall. From here, the visitors travel through the doors at the end of the image into the main visitor event space. Employees will travel through another path into the heart and soul of the workplace, dubbed the Pulse, to start their day. Next slide, please. The Pulse is a robust amenity zone located in the middle of the floor stack and is a hub of activity for the headquarters. The Pulse contains a variety of work and social spaces meant to attract and create community. It has an enhanced pantry with fresh and healthy food and beverage options, a tech lounge for IT training and support, a wide variety of individual and group seating options, and of course, you have to have a ping pong area. Open stairs connecting all 5 floors converge in this area, creating a sense of vertical community. The Pulse also connects to the visitors event space, which I mentioned earlier, and a grand 3,200 square foot landscaped and furnished terrace, open to all to use. One of the most popular areas in the Pulse is what we call the sunken living room. Overlooking the terrace, it has a cozy indoor-outdoor feel. With the cushy sofa running throughout the space, it's a great area to hang out for 1 or 2, or with the tiered seating around it, it can be used for larger team meetings and presentations. Again, it's all about choice. The event space, next slide, please. The event space was developed as a comfortable greeting and meeting environment. A loungy pre-function area serves a variety of conference and huddle rooms, a multi-function training room, and is anchored by a boardroom, which is enclosed with a glass movable wall system. With the walls retracted and pole-mounted monitors pivoted outward, the boardroom opens to the lounge, creating a large space for gatherings and presentations. All the furniture, including the boardroom table itself, is mobile and can be stored in an adjacent storage area, providing total flexibility. This space really can do basically anything whenever you need it. Again, about choice. And then a tour of the office wouldn't be complete without showing where the work is actually being done. In the center of each work floor is an area called the Commons. These amenity-rich zones, which are a scaled-down version of the Pulse I spoke of earlier, connect the Eisner community vertically with interconnecting stairs and horizontally to the neighborhoods. There are 4 distinct workplace neighborhoods on each floor, this image being one of them. And I'm breaking down the scale of the workplace and providing a sense of individuality and locality for Eisner's employees. The neighborhoods address the wellness pillar of the design brief. All workspaces are provided with natural daylight and views. All worktops throughout the entire campus are height adjustable. Common support spaces are dispersed around the floor to promote activity and movement throughout the day. Get up and move, get your blood going. And biophilic design elements such as organic patterning, textures, and colors, as well as a really robust live plant program, bring nature to the users throughout the headquarters. So now that we have a sense of what EisnerAmper headquarters is, let's get going sharing how we got there during COVID. Take it over, Sally.
Good job, Mark.
Thank you very much. So the first question today really relates to project vision and goals. Rob, from the client's perspective, can you describe the project's vision, goals, and success metrics?
So there was one metric that was set out by our CEO, and that was this. At the end, if it looks like an accounting firm, we will have failed. And so that was my marching orders. And from there, we started to develop a vision, a workplace strategy project back in 2017. We got our staff involved from the beginning, which was really important. And as I look back at the output of that strategic visioning, it's really pretty remarkable. This is in 2017. So a couple of the project goals were to create a workplace that's engineered for value and flexible to respond to global disruption, to create a strategic workplace that facilitates future work styles. And one of the directions for change was technology to support various ways of working at home and in the office. And so that was 2017. And I think what's really important to note is that the pandemic accelerated the things that we were already visioning rather than changing them.
Excellent, thank you. Mark, to elaborate, can you explain few other design drivers coming out of FCA's vision work, workplace analysis, and overall programming?
Yeah, it really was about, back to the driver we talked about earlier on change and choice and varieties. So the master program is accommodating 850 staff, but in 590 total reservable seats. And 124 of those are in enclosed spaces. So we had a lot of variety of where you could work and encouraging people to work from wherever, be it the office or working at a client's office or working from home, which again goes back to our success with COVID. The reservation system really was a key to all of this. Being able to go onto your mobile app, choose your space that you want to work for the day, have everything there ready for you when you get there, and have a place to store your stuff when you are not in the office. They use a project called Agile Quest Forum, which is a great reservation system. And then just making this a place where people want to go. People don't have to come to the office. Pre-COVID, that was the goal. And so making this someplace they want to come. So really filling it with beautiful amenities, making it a space that was healthful, active, and enjoyable to hang out with your coworkers. And those were really our driving principles for the design side.
Thank you. So Rob, back to you. Can you talk a little, what were the business and cultural decisions when EisnerAmper considered the introduction of unassigned seating, reservations, and actually kind of leveraging ratios?
Well, initially there was a lot of pushback from I'd say at the partner level, folks that you're dealing with people who have worked a certain way for a long time. There was an element of I earned it. I'm a partner. I should have an office. I should have my own office. Put my pictures on the wall, my diploma on the wall. And when we started to talk to our staff, we were actually initially really pleasantly surprised to hear that there was actually a pretty open feeling towards the non-dedicated environment, non-dedicated workstation environment. It was interesting. I'll always remember the two things that were pointed out to us. They said we'd be open to it if it's clean, right? And so got to be clean when I show up the next day. If it's other than where I sat yesterday, it's got to be clean. And the other is consistency of experience. And so from a technology standpoint, I have to make sure that if I'm going to move around from space to space, it's the same experience everywhere we go. So what we did was we were very fortunate timing wise. We had a similar project going on out in San Francisco. We had an opportunity to really pilot a lot of this about a year earlier in a 12,000 square foot space, including the cultural elements and change elements you're talking about, Tony. That went really well. I think getting staff involved in the process and listening to them was really important. I did things like I gave up my office and moved out into a workstation, open workstation in our old space. We focused on the pillars and what people were gaining rather than what they were giving up. And then we held, and Mark helped us with these, what we call day in the life sessions, where we actually, rather than just describing it and showing pictures, we actually created an experiential presentation around how people were going to use the space. And it was really well received, built around those four pillars that Mark mentioned.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. So let's shift gears and now kind of speak a little to the building and the lease. So the next question really relates to building and lease. Can the panel please speak to the challenges and opportunities you encountered while working with the landlord?
So I can take that initially. The challenges were the lease was the landlord work portion of the lease had about 30 plus items on it, whether it's the landlord work, strictly landlord work, which you're used to seeing when you go into a new construction. Then there was a section for pre-possession work, which they owed us before we sort of took possession. Then some categories were post-possession, and each one of these 30 or so items tied back to the lease to specific dates. So I just remember the day that I had to tell Jay that the lease wasn't a regular lease and our schedule was going to have to be sort of staggered. to one point with the slab openings and the slab closings of, so Jay is saying, so what are you saying? You're giving me the space, but I can't start this one particular stair yet. And yeah, so we survived that, but that was the biggest challenge. I think they had lot line windows and they had a little delay getting the permitting for that. There was bathroom work, the ground floor lobby turnover, part of the pre-possession was turning over the space itself on the inside, then the post-possession was doing the actual storefront. So that was definitely different than we were expecting, but in the COVID world, it made it a little bit harder, to say the least, because every delay would be exaggerated down the line because of the specifics that we were still waiting to get something handed over. But all in all, it panned out okay. I mean, the ground floor and the terrace, I think, were the two items that we were the most concerned about. But at the end of the day, it all fit in. Thanks to Jay, I would say.
Yes. Jay, you're on mute.
For us, if you reference the dates that Lauren was referring to that were lease driven, it really turned into a phased turnover from the landlord, right? So the landlord had work to do to prepare the space in order for Rob and his team to take it over as the client. And then we wanted to make sure that our design from our team's perspective was going to marry to those conditions and be able to build a successful project. So it required that in some aspects, based on the lease driven dates, we had to be a bit nimble about us starting, what it meant to actually start, what work we could get done as far as a pre-possession turnover as it took place, and then ultimately when we actually got to a full 100% workforce on site and allowed us to build per the schedule.
Okay. And Jay and Lauren, can you elaborate kind of from a coordination standpoint? There was also a lot of landlord work. We had, core restrooms being done, like you said, window replacement, demolition, etc.
There was about 3 to 4 other GCs, Jay, that you were trying to coordinate?
Correct. Yeah. So in a normal case, Tony, we walk into a building. In some cases, the landlord's already performed the demolition and we're walking into a clean canvas, so to speak, and we start construction from scratch. Here we actually latched onto a number of existing elements that we went ahead and modified and made them look new. We'll talk about some of those later on in the presentation, like the staircase. But for the most part, the challenging thing from a logistical standpoint, in particular as it related to COVID, is that it wasn't just JT Magen on site performing their activities and having control over their own workforce. It was a number of other general contractors still involved in some of these post-handover conditions that the landlord had to meet that allowed us to have to kind of mix our workforce and traffic with others on site. And the compliance to COVID became that much more important and crucial to the success of the project.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Thanks, Lauren. So let's shift to the COVID-19 pandemic. This question is for everyone. Please discuss the pandemic's impact on the project from each of your perspectives. Anybody can take it away.
Well, I'll start because we made a lot of assumptions. This is a space that wasn't handed over until the day we started construction, so it had never been demoed. There were a lot of hidden conditions. And, as every architect does, it's like, we'll take care of that in CA. So they did all the demo and all those conditions were exposed and we weren't able to go on site. So there was a lot of really great handholding from JTM to get us through these, and to figure out how to address these unknown conditions when they came up.
Right. Mark, it's a good point. I mean, look, for us, much like the rest of the world, our process, Tony, became less traditional and had to go virtual, right? So the reality is that we suffered a shutdown based on the city shutting down for construction. Fortunately for us, this project was deemed an essential construction project based on the business type that EisnerAmper offers as an accounting firm. So we were back to work sooner than most projects within the city, but the kudos to this team, and I've said it before to all of you individually, is that, the success here was really the fact that we were able to remain as productive as we were during the COVID shutdown virtually with regard to logistics, coordination, administration, and how we made our way through some of the points that still needed to be resolved on the project while we weren't physically there, right? So, Mark made a good point. Most of the things that took place on site from a discovery standpoint, as far as the existing conditions go, those happened either through a Zoom call with an iPad or some type of a FaceTime call so that we could point out some of the existing conditions that we were up against. But it was important. We still had to do that level of analysis so that we could make sure the existing conditions were marrying with the new design, and we had the ultimate outcome that we were looking for, which was a high quality project.
Yeah, and I went back through my notes before today's presentation. We did not miss one project meeting, not one. And we had separate meetings, alongside the weekly project meeting. Now, personally, and the team knows me, I'm a purist. If you don't show up at my job site, I don't really even want to talk to you. So for me, it was a big deal to do Zoom, and everyone joined. I mean, for the most part, even, most people had their cameras on, and I never thought that would happen. And it made it a little bit easier because, for me, I felt like we were the guinea pigs. I know Jay had other jobs going on, but I did not. So I'm thinking, how do we keep this job going? How do we keep the motivation going? How do we find out where the real problems are without being there, laying drawings out on a table and figuring it all out? But to JT Magen's credit, they still had a team on. We were home on Zoom. They still had a team out there for a good 3 weeks later, sort of risking their lives with tons of masks. And this was early on. This was March. So people I don't think anyone realized how long this would go or what the ramifications were, but they took it very seriously. They had enough PPE, the temperature checks happened. And I think, the big impact, along with how are we going to get this job done, was, is this really that serious? How are we going to all stay healthy? That's how I felt. And, I know
that's a good point.
The normal, Matt, can you meet the guy, let the guy in? I felt personally like we were really asking a huge favor at the time. Rather than this young guy going home to his wife and kids, he was sticking it out. So was Lucas, so was Jay. So that, I think we were all very sensitive to that. But nevertheless, things kept moving. I really don't even think we could say something went wrong because we weren't there. It might have taken a few days extra. But even some of the walkthroughs, Rob, I met you on a Sunday. We had a very small group. You could still park your car in front of the building, which you can't do that anymore. But I think we collectively, luckily, we had already formed a bond with the project team. So it made it a lot easier for me to say, yeah, Rob, I'm not that comfortable taking the train in. And we made it work. Right. I think the entire team.
A lot of flexibility across the group.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, as a group, we had to remain nimble. I mean, that was the idea behind it. Everybody was nimble. Everybody presented themselves in a way that they were up for the challenge. It was taxing on the field team. They were long days, stressful days in the fact that you couldn't just say, hey, walk in the front door and come up to the job site and do whatever task you have to perform. Every protocol from a logistics standpoint had to be followed to a T to ensure that we were running a safe project and that we were doing whatever we could to follow the COVID protocols set forth by the New York City Department of Buildings, making sure we're social distancing. And it did put a strain on the team to some degree mentally, because everybody had to be on their A game the entire day that they were on site to be sure that each of those protocols was being followed and we were running a safe job site.
Sure. So Jay and Lauren, within that category, we had some very specific issues. We had some permitting issues with respect to DOB. I know we had some significant issues with structural steel trades, just manpower in general. Could you expand on that?
Yep. Sure. So, one of the things that was a challenge, and there are challenges on every project, but this one had unique challenges along with, what was happening in the city from a shutdown perspective. But structural steel, the coordination of structural steel and the implementation of structural steel is something that usually happens off hours in a building. It requires an overtime permit, right? Well, the Department of Buildings was, first of all, hesitant to reopen projects based on what was going on in the city with COVID. We were, again, fortunate enough to have us deemed as an essential construction project, so we opened early, but they were very resistant to go ahead and allow for long days to take place, for after-hours permits to be issued, which was a stipulation by the building that we had to do structural steel work after hours. So here we are in a conundrum. We want to get the work done. We want to move things forward. Unfortunately, we weren't able to actually get permits issued by the the Department of Buildings that allowed us to work those overtime shifts because they were hesitant to do it. They didn't want people in the city at a particular time of night or later than a particular hour because they realized that people were at home. They were not going to work. They didn't want to cause disturbances. They didn't want to get complaints. I completely understand that. What it did for us is it made what would have been a full 8-hour overtime shift be diminished into a few hours a night based on the permit stipulations that were given to us.
And staggering extras for overtime, staggering.
Yes,
Until the
a lot of
building,
downtime.
until the building did allow us to start working more hours during the day, which was a special
Correct.
request. So they did
And
allow us
again,
to do that.
To the credit of the building, they too were nimble. They recognized the fact that they didn't have a whole lot of tenants in the building. And they allowed us to go ahead and expand our work hours so that we weren't truly starting an overtime shift at 6 p.m. They allowed us to peel those hours back and start at a 3 p.m. slot so that I could actually get a full shift of iron workers in there to go ahead and install steel from, let's call it 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., as opposed to having a permit until 2 in the morning, which was a no-go. They weren't letting us do that.
Right. And they did also allow us to use the fire stairs, which normally, some buildings, it's just zero tolerance with that. And we had our private elevators to use. So getting manpower up and down, that was a plus that they worked with us
Yep.
on. And they did their best to try to assist with the COVID restrictions that we had, the temperature checks, again, another huge cost. I think things are a little bit different now, but in the beginning, when this was all going down, we had to have our own temperature person. And so they were hired and they sat in the loading dock. I think other buildings now have sort of grouped it together. So, but back then that was a big hit for the client.
So Jay and Lauren, if you shift a minute for kind of material and supply chain concerns, can you expand
Yep.
that a little?
Sure. Look, just as us as professionals weren't in our workplace and people had to work from home, if you weren't deemed an essential business during the shutdown, you weren't open and you weren't fabricating things like millwork, like metal goods, lighting, things that we needed to go ahead and make sure we're still in production to allow us to have the materials we needed to build the project, right? We need two things to build every project. We need a workforce and we need the materials. Well, if we don't have the materials, we can't build the project, right? So in that case, we did have supply chain issues in the fact that even when certain manufacturing shops did get back to capacity, they were at a diminished capacity, and whatever lead times we may have faced for production of materials, in some cases they would go ahead and double. We were missing dates with regard to commitments from vendors based on deliveries and expected deliveries of materials. And what we had to do is basically on a weekly basis, we had to revise our schedule to accommodate those types of delays, rework certain adjustments and certain tasks to happen, maybe not so much in sequence as to what we're used to, in order for us to keep enough momentum on the project, keep things moving so that we had some semblance of a schedule that we were maintaining for Rob and his team at EisnerAmper.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you.
Unusually, I mean, a lot of the furniture was delivered while we were still doing sheetrock. I mean, things
correct.
came in, they came in
Yeah.
and we just had to deal with it.
And some of the
Yep.
furniture, we had 3 furniture dealings and some of the plants had shut down. They were able to pick up the speed when they reopened.
Right.
So there was pretty, it could have been worse delays, but we survived when they reopened, they were relatively quick to deliver.
So Jay,
We're still missing a warming drawer. I think that's about it.
Don't talk about that on here, Mark.
I know both Jay and Lauren started to talk about the logistics of actually the job site safety. So just a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
I know that the DOB required a COVID plan. There were multiple inspections. We were very lucky to only have 2 positive cases of construction workers with COVID. Can you speak a little to those, how you managed through that?
Sure. So, JT Magen as a company had to put their best foot forward and develop their own COVID protocols. Some of those requirements exceeded and were above and beyond the CDC guidelines, as well as what the New York City Department of Buildings was mandating. A big thing, just to talk through a couple of items, the temperature testing was a big deal, right? When any of the workers would make their way into the building, we had to set up a station by which we could take their temperature because early on, that was a big indicator as to whether or not you were symptomatic or not symptomatic. In addition to that, the DOB mandated that we had proper number of facilities for hand washing, right, to make sure that we had a clean site. So in this case, we actually went ahead and leveraged the base building bathrooms, and we probably in this case opened more of the base building bathrooms than we would normally and protected those bathrooms so that we could use them on a daily basis and keep everyone safe from a hand washing perspective. The biggest challenge that we had on site is really the social distancing, right? Because in some aspects, you have people that need to work as a team. If you're hanging a piece of sheetrock on a ceiling, it's not a task that one person can do alone. There's usually two people on that board and then having to screw it in place. So there were certain guidelines set that allowed people to work in close proximity as teams. But the bigger challenge is when you started to have things like lunch breaks and coffee breaks, to be sure that people weren't congregating together and being social, we had to make sure that we maintained social distancing at those times of the day. And we actually had to assign a separate superintendent to basically walk around and police those types of activities so that we were making sure that we stayed in compliance. The last thing we wanted to do, Tony, was create some type of an infraction that would promote the idea of the job being shut down, because the idea behind it was for us to keep ourselves open and running and build the job as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and hats off to JT Magen, because I know that in the beginning, getting hundreds of tradesmen to be wearing masks properly, face shields, it's a lot of observation and supervision.
Yeah, I think they kept a lot of that to themselves, Tony, but I'm sure it was a bigger struggle.
It was a difficult task, a lot of mental strain, a number of times having to repeat yourself over and over to sometimes different people, but a lot of the times the same people, and just, recurring theme of face masks, social distancing, following the proper protocols.
We all took turns as being the mask police. I think I got my frustrations out just by walking around. And also, Jay, just real quick, the DOB visits were a serious thing. The amount of paperwork, I can remember Lucas showing me stacks. They didn't want to see a digital report of who's been temperature checked. They wanted to see
binders and binders. Everybody has a checklist that they have to fill in before they enter the job site. That it's a similar checklist that probably all of you are familiar with. To note whether you're feeling symptomatic or not, if you had a temperature, signing off, making sure you note a person that's an emergency contact. All that paperwork had to be compiled on a daily basis. We had binders and binders of COVID paperwork that we had to deal with on a daily and weekly basis that, again, logistically, in a normal aspect would slow us down, but we assigned the proper personnel to handle that specific responsibility and kept things moving as efficiently as we could.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
So shifting topics for a second. So the project had, in addition to your traditional subcontractors and trades, based on the design, had many specialty trades. Can you speak how you manage those vendors, any challenges you had, and how you've overcome them?
Sure. I mean, look, the philosophy on my end, Tony, is whether it's a vendor that's hired directly by EisnerAmper or somebody that's promoted through the design field, we have to treat them as though we're our own vendor, right? Because they need to understand the expectations when it comes to quality of the project, the cost of the project, and the schedule. And if I take the approach, and you guys know this about me, if one entity on the project fails, we all fail. So I have to ensure that everybody that signed up for the project understands the rules, understands what we're after as far as our schedule compliance goes, and have to treat them as though they're my own vendor. In this case, there was a lot of coordination, certain things like building systems. We talked a bit about the DAS antenna system throughout the space. We needed to be sure that the DAS vendor, who was essentially a building vendor at that point, didn't just come into the project and run cabling roughshod wherever they wanted to. We had to make sure that it was done in a conscientious manner so that ultimately that type of infrastructure and how it was routed through the ceilings worked, and again, meshed with the idea of what was going to ultimately be the architectural design that the FCA team put together, right? So it's a matter of having the proper walkthroughs, having the proper conversations, albeit virtually or on site. With Lauren's help, we went ahead and managed that particular vendor, and ultimately it was successful in the fact that we got the antennas located where we wanted them to. We hit as much of the cable as we wanted to, and particularly in this open ceiling design that you guys presented, that was of paramount importance. I think that portion of the coordination with the DAS vendor was very successful.
Terrific. Lauren, would you like to add anything? I know you were instrumental in the environmental graphics, furniture, canteen, food service.
The graphics, as beautifully as they came out, were very difficult to coordinate, and probably only because we were staggering and phasing things that weren't supposed to be initially. Every time Jay had a level 5 wall set up, invariably something happened the next night. A mover came in, and a normal ding meant we had to repaint the entire wall. So we had paint fatigue but there was a, Airspace was their consultant for pretty much all the branding and signage. And they had Applied Image, which was a vinyl company that did all these beautiful graphics and color tied in each individual floor to their neighborhood. You had Coil that did the other branding and signage, and you had EXP that did the digital component in the monitors like you saw in that earlier picture. And again, the 3 furniture dealers plus their many manufacturers, not to mention Space Store, right? They did the lockers. So there was like 4 furniture people to coordinate, but you know, it all worked. We were a little cranky, but it worked.
Tony, I will say the one thing that's unique about this project is really the terrace, and that's the backdrop that Rob Levine has behind him. You know, not a lot of spaces have a dedicated, not a lot of office space has dedicated outdoor space just for them, right? And in this case, through VVA's help with EisnerAmper, they worked a lease deal here where they had dedicated outdoor space. So the challenge there, of course, and it may not be fully completed in the sense that there will be some seasonal planting that takes place after all this damn snow is gone, I'm sure. But nonetheless, we completed the project. It really brings a certain level of the outdoors inward as far as how the space relates both interior to the exterior. It's a fantastic space to be on. You kind of lose sight of the fact that you're in New York City when you're sitting on that terrace. And it was also just a great design element that was an unusual feature that I don't see on every project, which is really great to be a part of.
Sure. Thank you, guys. So let's shift to 2 critical topics. Let's talk about the impact of cost and schedule. And I mean, we've got an accounting firm, so we wanted to make sure that we took care of the costing. And of course, we had COVID, so we managed through the schedule. So Jay, Lauren, and Rob and Mark,
We had
how did you kind of manage through these unprecedented times?
Well, we had it set up. Will is our QS, and Will worked with Dave McGee, who is the EisnerAmper accounting person that helped us with the cost report. So there was some shifting of the cash flow, I think, when we had slowed down due to COVID and extended out. There was some change orders because of COVID that, just the temperatures and whatever that we had to take care of. And then there was, the stickier issues were repeatedly getting from consultants their extension of schedule fees, which was, it's a sticky subject, but through no fault of their own, the job that was supposed to end in June now is ending in October. And I just remember when we were started to build the CA, I kept sending it back to our accounting person. And he said to me, well, we're in CA. I'm like, but nobody's there doing CA. He said, well, but we're still in CA. So somebody's walking around, somebody's Zooming or photographing, but eventually you run out of CA. So those were sticky issues, but I felt that we had already formed such a good relationship with Rob's team that we were able to capture everything on our cost report that meshed with their cost reports. And to this day, we still, touch base with Dave to make sure that, was there anything extra during the move? Did you have any technology issues that maybe we didn't know about? And so on. And there may be some day 2 work, but I feel the document was set up perfectly going into it so that we were able to capture a lot of these things.
Yeah, Lauren, I think go ahead, Rob,
Jay.
sorry. I thought, Lauren, the idea behind it is, and Tony, for you, cost management in this case really came down to proper forecasting, right? We knew we were going to have something to deal with when it came to COVID and logistics. And the fact that we were kind of in step with communication and very open about what it meant to the project, it was really VVA's proper, forecasting of what was going to happen from a cost perspective that allowed all of us to kind of sleep at night and understand that, we were going to have some things to deal with, but ultimately made the job successful from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, and credit to everyone, because it can't be easy doing cost forecasting and management with an accounting firm. It's kind of what we do. So.
You said it, Rob. We didn't.
and I'll tell you, one of the things that was really interesting here is due to the pandemic. I actually probably visited the site. I live on Long Island. I probably visited the site when we were building out San Francisco more frequently than I did this office, which was across the street from our previous office.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit unusual. I'm going to throw a couple of other numbers. This is less about the construction and more about, gets a little bit back to the vision for a second. And so, we had set out to cut out about 24% of our footprint through this design and through the reservation system. Recently, there was a survey of about 50, larger accounting firms. 60% of them are now, with the pandemic, obviously experience and the knowledge, now planning to decrease their square footage by 1 to 10%, 60% of them, 30% by 10 to 20%, and 10% by 20 to 30%. We had set out to cut out 24% before the pandemic. And actually, as a result, we were able to close down another office. So we actually cut out about 32%. And we have capacity probably to add another 100 people. So, that before you even add another 100 people, we think that translates to about $4.5 million of rent and occupancy costs a year.
Terrific. That great statistics. So Rob, I want to just get your view quickly, because I'm being mindful of time, on how the management team at EA kind of developed a return to office strategy, because you've been working ever since the pandemic, then leaving us time for some photographs and Q&A.
Sure. So the RTO, we have an RTO task force that I'm involved with, and it's across all of our offices, but New York does have one. This project has one thing that is different, which is the reservation system. I'll talk to in a minute. And so really the RTO the guidelines were developed first and foremost. We had to make sure that we're following all the local regulations of the local jurisdictions, and really following science around social distancing, things like that. But really, at the end of it, it was really about safety and keeping in mind that we really had three sort of groups of people. We had what we consider our essential colleagues, the folks that needed to be in the office to do their work, whether that was opening and scanning mail or office operations, tax processing, IT. And so we wanted to make sure that we were going to protect those folks that had to come to the office to do their jobs. Then there was a group of people who they could technically work from home, but very challenging to work from home for a variety of reasons. And then the great majority were working great from home. Right. And so we really built our guidelines around RTO, around that, encouraging people to work from home to protect those other groups. And the one thing about the New York City, I'll say, is when we turned on the reservation system, it opened up the office. Even though we're at 25% capacity on those 590 workstations, we're able to open up the office to all 850 people to reserve whenever they want. So great leverage of the office space based on the original design.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
and Rob, the office has been open since February 1. Can you just share some feedback on how your employees are enjoying it?
So the office actually opened up in mid-November. We went to the reservation system on February 1. I have heard, so it's limited number of people. We're probably in the 5%-ish, 10%-ish range. I have heard only glowing rave reviews of the space, and so different than what people were, expecting for an accounting firm, which goes back to that original statement. One of my favorite quotes is from a staff person that I spoke to one day when I was there, and I asked, and he said, "Oh, this is great." And I said, "Elaborate. What are you feeling?" And he said, "I can't believe this is where I work now." He said, "It feels like a cross between a downtown media company and a Silicon Valley tech company."
Excellent. Thank you.
That's a win. That's a win.
Thanks, Rob.
I felt the same way. I think I told you on a weekend. I feel like this is one of the media companies I've been doing, not an accounting company. No offense, and you laughed. But what did somebody say to you about
you brought cool to Third Avenue?
You brought cool to Third Avenue.
That's right.
So, Rob, we don't have images for people on the Zoom. We don't have images of the ground floor welcome center due to construction outside on the building skin. But could you speak a little about that amenity?
Sure, and I think there's probably a few amenities that really stand out. I know Jay mentioned the terrace that I'm on here, which is awesome. The ground floor, and so those were two things that we were looking for when we were doing our search for space. We wanted the EisnerAmper experience to begin right off the street. We wanted our whether it's recruits, whether it's potential clients, existing clients, our people. We wanted that experience right off of the street. And so this was a particular opportunity. There was some retail space. And so people will come, they can enter right into our space, really well branded. There's a beautiful wall on the side with a saying around innovation, service at, and so come in, they're going to be greeted there by a hospitality person, begin that experience. It's really almost a business lounge is the way we looked at it. And so we have clients, prospects, people who come in and they have a half hour between meetings. They can come in. There's a huddle room. There's a phone room. There's a lounge. And so they can actually do some work if they have some extra time to spare. And then when the meeting's ready, they come up into that 7th floor that you showed, Tony, where you come off the elevator with the digital branding and that really amazing environment. And that's also where they would come into if there was an event. They would come into this really, really flexible event space that has a boardroom with retractable walls that opens up into a sort of almost like a cocktail lounge outside of an event center and training facility that's next to that cafe, which is next to the terrace. And so the flexibility of the kinds of events that we'll be able to run, just great branding, internal branding, external branding, talent acquisition, terrific stuff.
Great. I think you're probably one of, very unique to have that kind of retail street level entrance in the city. So I think from a timing standpoint, we ought to shift to some of the completed images, and we've got some process images that Jay and Mark will take you through. Liz, if you can go ahead and share.
Oh yeah, so we'll go through these relatively quickly. So one of the things that we talked about earlier is we didn't have a chance to do a lot of investigation prior to construction starting. So there were some existing conditions and assumptions. One of are we sharing it? No. One of the things that drew us to this individual space was the atrium. There's an existing 3-story communicating stair from the 7th to the 9th floor that allowed us to build a sense of vertical community. The landlord had all the paperwork for it. We thought they gave it, that was permitted and that was approved. And after we got digging, the landlord couldn't find any of that. And we had to go back, and Lauren and Jay did a lot of work trying to get this existing condition permitted so we could actually reuse it. Yeah,
we had to get a determination.
Yeah, we also had the shop drawings of how the stair was built, and of course, after Jay stripped it all down, it wasn't built that way. So here we go. You can go to the next slide. So there was this amazing 3-story space, and so JTM had to strip it down. We had to look at it. We had to try to figure out most of this remotely because we weren't going on in space, how to redesign this and how to get it permitted. So Jay, why don't you, here's a before and after, but Jay, why don't you kind of tell us some of the stories?
So cool.
Yeah, so one of the things that's harder for us to do in this business from a construction management standpoint is to take something that's an existing element, right? Try to deface it to some degree and then put it all back together and make it look like it's brand new. And I think that this photo that you see here, the before and after, really epitomizes that idea. We had the skeletal structure of the stair in place. We went ahead and took all the finishes off the stair itself, and then essentially remade it with the unique design that FCA put together with metal and glass components, and really made this a living and breathing atrium, as Mark called it, for EisnerAmper to utilize.
I'm going to the next slide. Here's just an example of the before, during, and after. So the before was, we found out the rise and run of the stair was just a hairline within code. The railings, the pickets and the rails weren't correct. Nothing about the original stair actually met code. The one in the center is a strip down, and then this is how JTM ended up giving it back to us.
Yeah, and the finishes here, again, are unique. This is not your average accounting firm, right? We've got grinded concrete floors. We've got, in this case, wood treads that are reclaimed wood treads. We've got blackened metal, steel, and glass as handrails. So this is definitely a progressive space when it comes to the design and the elements and the finishes that were put into it.
You can go to the next slide, which shows the final product, which we're very, very proud of. And this, when I speak of the commons and the central amenity space in every floor, this is an example of what that space is. Let's move on to the next. So this is between 7 and 9, but we also had to create a connection between 9 and 10 and 6 and 7. So another example of needing to do a lot of this on the fly because of the getting the determination on the atrium stair. It got involved in, okay, how do these new stairs, how are they located and how are they permittable? So both the upper and the lower communicating stair have a horizontal sliding fire curtain to separate those floors, which again involved a lot of coordination offsite and with Jay's team.
Yeah, so from a fire code perspective, we had to go ahead and put in that horizontal sliding shutter that allowed us to compartmentalize the space and separate it in a way that allowed for us to be in compliance as per building code. Again, this is actually a new staircase, so we started from scratch in the sense that we had to dig up the existing structural drawings, understand what was happening within the structure of the building, reframe or frame in this opening with new structural steel, and then ultimately implement this stair that spoke to the same vocabulary from a finish standpoint as the other stair in the atrium that Mark discussed earlier.
And I find it curious that this tree on the landing, I have no idea. I wasn't there. I have no idea how they got it in the building, but there's some massive trees going on.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next phase. And Jay, this is your baby, the Terrace. It was a complex project.
So, it looks like in the before picture, we've got, make-believe grass carpet, right? to make up what looks like a terrace, the before shot. Ultimately, the building had a hand in prepping this space for us and making it into a paver type scenario that was on a raised floor pedestal. So that system did exist when we took over the space as a post-condition turnover. But ultimately, through the work of Eisner Design and FCA, there was a new design that was out there that became a very geometric in some of its shapes and how we actually cut the pavers away and provided some planting areas. We have some teak wood platforms as well that act as a decking that, again, add another element of design here. Ultimately, this acts as, and you can see some of the structure in the during photo. We've got the stanchions and some of the structure that led to the benches, the seating benches that are out there to allow people to congregate and actually enjoy the outdoor space. But it's a fantastic space. Again, it's a unique element that we don't see on an everyday office project, and I hope that EisnerAmper gets great use out of it.
Well, and one of the reasons it was you don't see a lot of this is getting involved in trying to make what was historically a building setback into an occupiable space, and that means there's a lot of weight restrictions that go into place. So although this terrace is very active and very full and has a lot of activity planned for it, we had to be very, very specific with every pound that we were putting and where we were placing it, so we didn't have to go underneath and upgrade the structure, which would have been immensely expensive.
That's correct.
To get that part.
No reinforcing required. Exactly.
No, we did good.
Why don't you go ahead to the next image?
The hot tub.
The hot
That's not a hot tub. Sorry.
Okay. This is the east end of the terrace that evolved into a more circular seating structure. I think through design evolution, this took on a couple of different facets, from a gazebo to other design elements, and ultimately ended up as what you see here. But again, it's a fantastic kind of destination as you make your way out the doors of the terrace from the interior space and head eastward to the end of the terrace, which is actually, again, to Rob Levine's backdrop. He's probably sitting in that area in his photo based on the backdrop that you see. He's at the extreme east end of the terrace.
Right.
Very close, yeah.
It's a great,
Okay,
very serene place back there.
and then the last slide, I think, is the open office, and this is the part that gave us all the most headaches. The part of the 10th floor had been already white boxed by the landlord, and so that was the only part we could see that had been demoed. So that was what we took as our standard for what the rest of the space would be when it was demoed. The before photo on the left was, okay, there's a lot of exposed steel. The fireproofing has fallen off. There were actually some slab infills that had been done previously. So there was a metal deck instead of concrete slab. It was really a mess. So JTM did amazing work to try to get it.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of beam restoration that did have to take place, and we did it in a calculated fashion so that we weren't adding unnecessary costs to the project. In other words, we went through the job, we understood exactly what the ceiling plan was offering as far as what was going to be closed ceiling versus open ceiling. And in the areas where it really made a difference and had a high impact, we received design direction from FCA to go ahead and restructure those beams so that we had something that looked like a normal geometry when you looked up into the open ceiling areas. Ultimately, you see it during the phase, the last photo to the right there. We ended up using a K13 spray in a number of locations that added two things. It allowed us to cover up a number of the messes and pock marks that we saw on the slab. And in addition to that, offered the benefits of some acoustic treatment to the slab so that the space wasn't quite so echoey. But it was a good collaboration on where to apply the idea of beam restoration and where it was going to be most important in the open ceiling plan, as opposed to staying away from that type of treatment in areas that were going to be closed.
Correct.
And the last slide is basically where Jay is sitting, the final product. So just
Right.
So we're up against the clock. We have about 5 minutes for Q&A, if there's any in the queue.
We probably talk too much.
imagine us.
Just you, Lauren. You talk too much.
Guilty.
No, no
I'm kidding.
questions here.
Okay, we'll leave a minute for any questions. But if not, that would end our panel discussion.
Aha, wait a second.
Oh, thank you, Liz.
How did the implementation of the AgileQuest software go?
Sure. We implement the implementation went smoothly. I know, with the pandemic, we had to change course a couple of times. We launched it February 1st. I used it myself. It's working really, really well. And we see expanding the use of that technology to the rest of our offices in the near term.
Great, that's it.
Great. Well,
Wait, there's one more question.
Oh, go ahead.
Were design changes made considered due to COVID? That's Rob's favorite question. That really is pretty much no, right?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely took a sort of a pause and caught our breath and said, okay, and our people were asking that exact question. And as we thought about it, what we realized is that we're going to use the space differently during what we call this RTO period, return to office period, while the pandemic and safety are still a concern. And so we mapped out the seats to 25%, and then that's what we put on the reservation system. But we really did, minor things around our COVID protocols, like setting up a host station to check in the badging and stuff like that. But in terms of the way our people are using the space, physically, we did not change it. We just are using it differently in the short term.
We have some more questions here. One was for Jay. You mentioned challenges with the feature stair. Is turnkey something you would advocate for renovation projects like this?
Yeah, when it comes to stair design, we do a lot of design build as far as stairs go. This one did not take on the design build approach. We did do it in a more traditional manner, in which case we had a steel subcontractor, we had a metal and glass vendor and fabricator, even to the point where we had a flooring vendor that installed the wood treads on the stair itself. But the approach on this one was a bit more traditional, nonetheless very successful. For things that are more complicated and some of the stairs that we see out there nowadays, we do most of our stairs as a turnkey approach.
And Dennis Summers had a question here. Did you attempt a phased approach to collaborative areas by way of buying to roll out? For example, boardrooms, conference rooms, setting up 10 people now versus use for 20 people down the road?
I don't think
for
any
me?
of that.
Rob, why don't you? It's probably more for Rob.
Yeah,
I mean, we did not. We're currently not using collaborative areas. and we'll find the right time and the right approach to starting to phase them back in. We right now we're not using collaborative areas at all.
An RTO question from David Reich. As part of your return to office strategy, what kind of data did your team collect, which ultimately guided what your footprint would be and how the space would be designed?
So what we did was, following the science of 6 feet of distancing, we had somebody who developed using technology, put all of our spaces and floor plans into this technology, and then we would go in and we would indicate how much distancing we wanted. So we didn't want 6 feet, we wanted 10 feet to be extra, conservative, or maybe we wanted 12 feet. And then that would come back and tell us which workstations would meet that criteria. And then that's what we put onto the reservation system as being active workstations.
Great. I think
Great.
that's it for the questions.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you to New York City Cornet for allowing us to present this project, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Cornet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great day,
Thank you.
everyone.
Stay
Good to
safe.
see a
Thank
lot of
you.
new
Thank
faces.
you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Well done. Thank you.